It started as a routine patrol. Just another day in the Caribbean. But within hours, the world's most advanced aircraft carrier was steaming toward Venezuela, and Washington knew something was about to break. The USS Gerald R. Ford, America's $11 billion supercarrier, wasn't there for a friendly visit. This was Operation Southern Spear, and what happened next would redefine the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere. To understand why the USS Gerald R. Ford suddenly appeared off Venezuela's coast, you need to understand what's been building for months beneath the surface. Venezuela isn't just another troubled nation. It's sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves, 304 billion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. And for years, Nicolas Maduro's regime has been playing a dangerous game, cozying up to America's adversaries while destabilizing the entire Caribbean basin. But something changed in late March 2025. Intelligence reports began flooding into the Pentagon showing unusual activity at Venezuelan military installations. Russian transport aircraft were making frequent trips to Caracas. Chinese naval vessels were conducting extended port visits. And most concerning, Venezuelan Su-30 fighter jets were conducting aggressive intercept drills suspiciously close to international shipping lanes that carry 40% of America's imported oil. The message was clear. Venezuela was testing boundaries, and they had powerful friends backing them up. On April 2nd, the situation escalated dramatically. A Venezuelan Navy patrol boat approached within 12 nautical miles of a U.S. Coast Guard cutter conducting routine counter-narcotics operations. The Venezuelan vessel locked targeting radar on the American ship for 17 seconds, a deliberate act of aggression that stops just short of pulling the trigger. The Coast Guard maintained course, professional and restrained, but the incident triggered alarm bells across Washington. Because this wasn't random. Venezuelan forces had received new orders, and someone was pushing them to be more confrontational. Within 72 hours, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin authorized Operation Southern Spear. The USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group, consisting of the carrier, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, 1 Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and a nuclear-powered attack submarine, was redirected from the Atlantic toward the Caribbean. Their official mission? Freedom of navigation operations and enhanced security cooperation with regional partners. The real mission? Project overwhelming American power directly into Venezuela's backyard and send an unmistakable message. Touch American assets, and the consequences will be immediate and decisive. The Ford isn't just any carrier. It's a technological marvel that represents the cutting edge of American naval supremacy. 75 aircraft, including F-35C Lightning stealth fighters, F/A-18 Super Hornets, E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft, and EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets. The ship's electromagnetic aircraft launch system can launch a fighter every 45 seconds. Its advanced arresting gear can recover aircraft faster than any carrier in history. And its dual-band radar can track thousands of targets simultaneously across hundreds of miles. When the Ford moves into position, it doesn't just change the tactical picture. It fundamentally alters the strategic calculation for any adversary within a 1,000-mile radius. But here's where it gets complicated. Venezuela didn't react the way most nations would when America parks a supercarrier nearby. Instead of backing down, Maduro doubled down. Venezuelan state television broadcast footage of military exercises featuring Russian-made S-300 surface-to-air missile systems and Sukhoi Su-30 fighters conducting simulated strikes against naval targets. Maduro himself appeared in military fatigues, declaring that Venezuela would defend its sovereignty against American imperialism with blood and fire if necessary. And he wasn't alone. Within 48 hours of the Ford's deployment, Russia's foreign ministry issued a strongly worded statement condemning American military provocations in the Caribbean. Russian Ambassador Anatoly Antonov called the carrier deployment an unacceptable threat to regional stability. Then came the real concern. Intelligence satellites detected a Russian intelligence-gathering vessel departing Cuba and heading toward Venezuelan waters, almost certainly tasked with monitoring American carrier operations and feeding real-time data to Caracas. Moscow was making it clear. Venezuela has friends, and those friends are watching. China remained publicly silent but quietly increased its presence. A Chinese Type 054 frigate conducting what Beijing called a goodwill visit to Venezuela suddenly extended its stay indefinitely. Chinese technicians were observed at Venezuelan radar installations. and financial analysts noted a sudden surge in Chinese credit lines to Caracas, money that could fund military modernization or simply keep Maduro's regime solvent while facing American pressure. This wasn't just about Venezuela anymore. It had become a geopolitical chessboard where Washington, Moscow, and Beijing were testing each other's resolve. The situation on the ground in Venezuela added another layer of complexity. Over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country since Maduro took power, creating the largest refugee crisis in Latin American history. Colombia alone hosts over 2 million Venezuelan refugees. Regional stability is collapsing under the weight of this humanitarian disaster. Drug trafficking organizations have exploited the chaos, turning Venezuela into a narco-state where cocaine flows freely toward the United States. And Maduro's regime has responded to domestic unrest with increasing brutality, documented human rights abuses that make any negotiated solution nearly impossible. The Biden administration faces a dilemma. Military intervention would be costly, both in lives and international legitimacy. But allowing Venezuela to continue destabilizing the region while partnering with Russia and China creates long-term strategic problems that may become unsolvable. Operation Southern Spear represents a middle path, maximum pressure short of war, a demonstration that America can and will respond when its interests are threatened. But every day the Ford remains in position, the risk of miscalculation grows. Venezuelan pilots conducting aggressive intercepts. Russian intelligence vessels shadowing American destroyers. Chinese signals intelligence collecting data on American electronic warfare systems. These are the ingredients for an accidental crisis that could spiral out of control before diplomats have time to intervene. Naval analysts point to several potential flashpoints. First, a Venezuelan Su-30 could lock weapons radar on an American aircraft during a routine patrol, triggering defensive protocols that escalate rapidly. Second, Venezuelan special forces could attempt a provocation, perhaps approaching an American vessel in small boats packed with explosives, testing whether the Navy will fire first. Third, Russia could deploy advanced anti-ship missiles to Venezuela under the guise of defensive cooperation, fundamentally changing the strike calculus and forcing Washington to consider preemptive action. Each scenario carries risks that far exceed the immediate tactical situation. Behind the scenes, diplomatic channels remain active, but strained. Brazil has offered to mediate. Colombia has quietly expressed concern about being caught between American military operations and Venezuelan retaliation. Cuba, still dependent on Venezuelan oil despite decades of tensions with Washington, watches nervously as its two critical relationships, Moscow and Caracas, pull it into a confrontation it cannot afford. Meanwhile, the Organization of American States remains paralyzed, unable to reach consensus on how to address Venezuelan authoritarianism while respecting sovereignty. The Ford Strike Group maintains position, conducting daily flight operations that demonstrate capability without crossing into Venezuelan territorial waters. F-35CS patrol the airspace. Destroyers track every vessel within 200 miles. The submarine, unseen and undetected, provides a lethal deterrent that Caracas can only imagine. This is modern deterrence, not threats, just presence. Not aggression, just capability. The message is clear without a word being spoken. Operation Southern Spear isn't over. The USS Gerald R. Ford remains on station, a floating reminder that American power can be projected anywhere, anytime. Maduro's regime continues its dangerous game, emboldened by Russian and Chinese support, but constrained by American firepower just over the horizon. The Caribbean, once considered America's backyard, has become a contested space where great powers test each other's resolve without firing a shot. This is the new face of conflict in 2025. Not tanks crossing borders, but carriers positioning for leverage. Not declarations of war, but escalating provocations that stop just short of the unthinkable. The question isn't whether another crisis will come. It's whether the next one will be the spark that ignites something no one can control. Subscribe to stay updated on Operation Southern Spear and the evolving situation in the Caribbean, because this story is far from over. The Ford is still there. Venezuela is still defiant. And the world is still watching.